Now, okay, so I'm going to briefly present to you some things that we have been discussing and acting on related to persistent identifiers. So just a quick reminder, what are persistent identifiers and why do we want to use them? Well, so we are concerned with something that is this new acronym GUR-PID. It's not just a PID, but it's a GUR-PID, standing for Globally Unique Resolvable Persistent Identifiers. And these, of course, provide not only identity, but also a means of resolvability, or also called indirection, and machine actionability of digital objects. So you can use the PID to directly access the object itself and or metadata about that object. PIDs are not only important for when it's time to publish end results of research, but they play an important role throughout the entire research data lifecycle. And they, first and foremost, maybe people have in mind that they provide a means for, well, through the identity for accurate citation, and they also enable extraction of usage statistics, for instance. We'll hear more about that later, I think. But they also, very importantly, support search, referencing, and general provenance capture in computer-run workflows. And we should also remember that persistent identifiers are not only useful for data and metadata, but also for a range of non-data objects that we encounter or use in the research infrastructures. That could be samples, measurement stations, even people and organizations, etc. So that is also important to keep in mind. PIDs are intimately connected to the concept of fair and fairness, and indeed persistent identifiers are explicitly mentioned in several of the FAIR principles. On top of that, there is also a concept of a fair digital object that has arisen in the last 5-6 years. This is building on every digital object, and here a digital object is a digital representation of any kind of object. So it could also be the digital representation of, say, a specimen sample in a museum, a soil sample, equally well as being a data set or a binary stream. So each of these digital objects should have a persistent identifier, and also associated with that what is known as kernel metadata, which are stored at PID registry level. And this, if it is cleverly enough constructed and also expressed in the form of types, which are in themselves machine actionable and machine interpretable, allows not only for boosting machine actionability and introducing faster workflows and more efficient data processing, but they also allow fast object filtering, which speeds up a lot of these CRU DEL operations that Keith was mentioning. By consistently and pervasively using persistent identifiers and typed entities in all our metadata records that we have, we enable the building of graphs and linkages between digital objects and their properties and the actions that can be applied to them. And this will all be very relevant, I think, to not only the envris, of course, but to all researchers and research infrastructures in the EOSC. So what have we been doing about in the context of PIDs and envri-fair? Well, we actually already started in the envri+ project that Anka mentioned earlier, the precursor of envri-fair, where we investigated the best ways of using persistent identifiers in the envris, and we made a series of recommendations for PID allocation and indeed also for data and digital object citation. Now in envri-fair we are picking up on this work. We're reviewing the recommendations, seeing if we need to make any changes. And we have also been extending and making an inventory of PID best practices outside of our own organizations. We have also looked at current PID usage by the envri-hub partners based on these aspects that we had identified earlier. And this has also provided a wealth of information on data management practices, including granularity, versioning, and the use of collections. And this will also affect which kinds of PID allocation strategies that the various project partners are going to apply. We also note that there is a great interest in starting to use PIDs for non-data objects, but this is only in its infancy. To enhance and further this work with PIDs in the ENVRIs, we have put on a number of training events, and we are also planning to go ahead with more. And last but not least, we have actually contributed to the EOSC PID policy and the EOSC PID architecture reports. So we are really trying to keep an eye on what is going on in the greater EOSC context. Finally, some recommendations and/or outlook from my side. So the first and foremost recommendation is that we need to really have all the ENVRI community members starting to apply best practices to assign persistent identifiers to all the digital objects that they are managing and curating. We should not only look at what the common handle system based identifiers that are the ones that we are maybe typically concerned with, but also look at how we can use persistent URLs and cool URIs, especially for semantic web applications. If we are going to succeed with really reaching a commonplace pervasive application of PIDs, we also need PID services to support this. And that is then from registries, lookup services, and maybe also other tools that can be built upon PID services by industry. These services need, however, to whoever is providing them to be flexible, sustainable, and also secure and trustworthy. And of course, providers can be set up like by the EOSC and be Europe-based, but they must always adhere to global standards and ways of working with persistent identifiers, because as we all know, research should know no borders. And my final point here is that it's very important that we in the ESFRIs engage with each other and exchange information and help to influence the design, functionality, and sustainability of PID services in Europe and beyond. Thank you.